If you're at a big institution which has great brand recognition and a track record and those good things, and consider you're the multi-billion-dollar IPOs that we were kind of first check in, then that's obviously helpful. And the infrastructure component, for sure, like on the LP side, and having a dedicated IR function and being on whatever it is, not 1 through 3, but 6 or 7, like all those things are definitely nice. The flip side of it, though, look, like I said earlier, I think venture's going 2 different ways, like kidding, or big or small and specialized. I love being high in conviction. I love being extremely nimble. I love being extremely specialized. In a world where your fund size is your strategy, I think being a very small fund gives you the best opportunity of delivering the best money returns to your LPs. And that kind of is what venture is at the end of the day.
Well, welcome to the Slice Pod, where we uncover the stories of fresh emerging managers across the early stage venture landscape. You are the founder and general partner of Step Function, an early stage venture fund investing a $12 million pre-seed and seed fund across software infrastructure in the East Coast and Europe, which we'll get into that in a minute. But first, let's begin where we always do around here. Was this always the plan? Did you always think you were going to start your own venture fund investing in infra?
So first up, thanks so much for having me on the pod. This is awesome. So happy to be here. I've always been a techie and loved entrepreneurship. Growing up at home, we got the computer and the internet when I was like 12. Dad walked me up to the local Waterstones. That's an English. It's a local kind of a book chain. And I got my first programming textbooks there and was hooked after that. I grew up in a financy business household though, so I was always surrounded with some of that chat around the dinner table. And I don't think I could have told you when I was 15, but kind of, hey, like VC is going to be a logical expression of those 2 interests coming together. But thankfully I figured it out by the time I was in college, got a few internships to help me along my way, and then joined Bain Capital Ventures out of undergrad. I joined there in 2012, stayed there for about a decade, predominantly on the West Coast, loved every single minute of it, got to work with some of the best founders in the business and some amazing investor mentors, everything from kind of former public company CEOs to multi-year Midas list honorees. So long way of answering your question, was the plan always to start my own fund? It didn't seem that way at the time, but in hindsight, it kind of feels inevitable.
Finally, we found the one. Like 30 episodes in, we finally find the person. It's great. It's awesome. You're a rare occurrence in the space.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Like I had an entrepreneurial relationship I knew I needed to scratch. I got the most gratification out of building something from nothing. And I knew I wanted to build something which was extremely focused and focused on first checks of founders building infrastructure software that didn't exist yet. And so in retrospect, I'm like, yeah, like I don't know what else I was going to do, but definitely at the time I was like, no, like there are options.
But what was the aha moment that really got you? Like, was it another Monday partners meeting at Bain? Was it yet another IC where one of your great ideas got turned down that made you say like, it's time for me to open my own shop, or nothing like that? Maybe less contentious, but we like to stir the pot a little bit. It's Friday afternoon after all.
Friday afternoon, we're all very caffeinated, so ready to let the spicy takes fly. I would say it's probably a little more slow burn than it was switch flipped, if that makes sense. There were a few moments where I was like, hey, look, I see the way the world's going. And I see what's happening in venture writ large. To dramatically oversimplify, I think there's kind of 2 parts that make sense. You either really go big, multi-stage, multi-sector, multi-product, do everything for everyone, or you try and specialize and be world-class at one thing. And I was like, I very much clearly gravitate into that. For me, it's true to the type of venture that I want to practice. When I was thinking through, do I start this? Obviously, it's a risk, right? It's this huge jump where you're like, I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to do that. There are options I was thinking through. And at the time, we were expecting our first kid. I try to think through what is the advice that I would give my kid if they were in a similar position. And it made it very, very clear to me, like, this was the time. You're not going to live a life of regrets. You got to go do your own thing.
You focus on infrastructure software, developer tools, data infrastructure, AI infrastructure, security monitoring, observability. What drew you to starting a fund specifically in this vertical? I know this was your area of focus for a long time. What made you feel confident that there is a franchise in the wings, given where we are right now with AI, with what's happening to the infra world? what made you feel so bullish about this space?
Infrastructure, like you said, anything involved in building, shipping, running, securing of software, there is a very specific crowd that self-selects into it. In terms of why get into this space, so broadly, there are kind of two major paths I see a lot of people pursue: applications or infrastructure. And there are two major reasons that infrastructure stood out. In an investor nerd standpoint, I talk about infrastructure being the densest set of potential power law outcomes. And what do I mean by that? I really struggle to think of any other area of software where you so reliably have multiple multi-billion-dollar outcomes that come out of the center every single year. If you think of monster IPOs within the past decade, infrastructure dominates. Like companies like Snowflake and Datadog, I think, could each give or take 50 billion in market cap. There's a whole long tail of like MongoDB, Confluent, Rubrik, and a bunch of others, which are also kind of give or take 10 billion market capitals.
And also a very juicy on the acquisition side. Like, those are like 100%. The largest acquisitions happening in the infra layer.
Yeah. Like just this week, we saw Databricks acquire Neon for $1 billion. And that's the third acquisition Databricks have done in the past couple of years, north of $1 billion. So you get these incredible technical teams who build highly strategic products, and people are willing to pay a premium for them. Think of it as a set of dormant volcanoes. The tectonic plates shift, this big eruption happens, but from an investor standpoint, unless you're in at the ground floor, then there's no way you're going to capture the value. By the time it's obvious, it's already too late. That's why you really need specialists who deeply understand the trends in the earliest stages and have the ability to build that conviction before there's the obvious kind of customers with revenue and other proxies you can go off on, which anyone can do, frankly. The other big part to your question about why infrastructure, the founder archetype just really spoke to me. I think there's an authenticity to the people that build in the space, right? It's not the business school person who saw a couple of friends get rich at a startup. You have a bunch of practitioners who have a very deep understanding of these are the sets of products that are out there. If I'm trying to do my job, like, here's the big thing which is missing. Here's the product that I wish existed. And I know exactly what needs to exist and who I'm building it for, because that was me. And I have a very prescriptive point of view on what the product is and how to build it. And that true, authentic, mission-driven founder, like, again, like, that profile I just don't find quite as common in other spaces, and something that really drew me to the sector.
You mentioned that incremental improvements at the infrastructure layer can lead to step function changes at the application layer. I think you also mentioned Neon. I think, like, I didn't fully understood what Nikita was building when he first pitched it to me. Glad that I had a partner that forced my hand into it. But then there was this crazy stat. Thank you. There was this crazy stat that I read, I think yesterday, as part of the info that leaked out of that acquisition. 80% of the databases started on Neon are actually spun by an agent, not a human. Yeah. When you talk about step changes from infra to app, like that, it's a crazy number. For all those crowds of folks that do not gravitate in the corner of the room where you and I hang out at parties, what does that actually mean? Let's explain it to a golden retriever. What does that translate into, and why should people care about this stuff?
Yeah, it's a good one. Neon Superbase is another, which is a good example, like a conventional data infrastructure product, which now has a phenomenal AI tailwind and a bunch of people picking up on that. More broadly, what do I mean by it? I think you're seeing this with a lot of the AI-enabled apps right now, where it's like, you as an end user don't really need to care what a foundation model does under the hood. Maybe you really want to go deep into the weeds to read about transformer architectures, and most people aren't doing that. But in terms of the difference between a Google search and ChatGPT, I think most people kind of intuitively understand that and feel it. And I think from an infrastructure perspective, the common example which everyone faces in their day-to-day life, like internet performance issues, for example. You go to a website and it's slow or it's buggy, like it's an e-commerce property and it's not responsive, or you can't hit the checkout link. Those are the types of things which make the difference between you making your purchase or not. And you know, when you have like a delightful user experience, you don't really think about all the plumbing behind the scenes that made it happen. The best end user experiences have a huge amount of very thoughtful and very deliberate infrastructure that went into crafting them.
Fund one, 12 mil, 25 checks, 250K checks for a target 2% ownership. How did you back yourself into this model? What's the math behind it?
Yeah, so 25 companies for me is the right blend of being able to have a relationship with every single founder that I work with and being extremely high conviction of every opportunity, but also having a large enough portfolio to absorb the loss ratios of super early stage venture, right? Like I'm typically investing when it's founders, there's an idea, maybe there's a barely functioning prototype, but the vast majority of the times I'm investing, it's truly just a couple of people that we call a team and an idea. But for me, it's very raw, the true sense of venture. In terms of 250K, for me, that's a great collaborative check size. I play nicely with everyone. It's big enough that it's meaningful to the founders, allows me to be a big part of the story and the cap table. And then my goal for founders is always, let me help you create the best syndicate possible to give your business the chance of success it deserves.
Do you think you can still get that ownership target into the hot ones? Like one of the reasons why I was skeptical about Neon is because that was like an insanely high priced seed round at the time. Like, you know, it looked like crazy. Like I would have never been able to buy 2% with 250K. How do you think about those? Like, you know, like I think that you spent enough time in this space. You've built a name for yourself. People send you deal flow all the time. I know that you try to pick off the beaten path, but how do you resist the temptation of cutting a check into something that you may not have much ownership of, but you know it's going to be a massive returner for the fund?
Yeah, great question. So typically when I'm investing, the post-money valuations I'm seeing are roughly 10 to 15 post-money, picking round numbers. I think there are definitely a bunch of name brand repeat founders who, if they want to, can raise way more money and at a much higher valuation straight out the gate. Frankly, I just don't gravitate towards those. I think of one of the teams I work with, repeat founding team, have had a huge multi-$100 million outcome in the past. What I loved about what they did was they were just hyper disciplined, didn't get over their skis, raised what I thought was a super, a nice kind of tightly constrained round and not crazy valuation that they could grow into. And this team could snap their fingers tomorrow and raise 4 times as much money, but they haven't done that. I think a lot of it just speaks to the founder type. You find people who truly believe in capital efficiency and scarcity breeding innovation. Those tend to be more founders I gravitate towards. Like, don't get me wrong, like, that's definitely a time to go big or go home. It's like, hey, we found product market fit. It's time to raise a bunch of money, invest heavily in sales and marketing, but not doing that too early before the company's ready.
How does the firm scale? Like, you know, let's assume that this first vehicle will be a smashing success, as we're confident it's going to be. Is it another 12 million? Like, are you going to stay small? Because it's hard to replicate this strategy, increasing the fund size, right? Even if you go up to a 30, if you want to keep the same portfolio construction, now all of a sudden you're competing with your former employer. It's a lot more difficult to justify why go one way or the other. How do you think about the future of the firm?
I think it can scale up a little bit, right? Like, I think you can have a 20, maybe 25-ish fund size and just ostensibly the same strategy. I think you're right, though, where there are pockets, which I kind of think of as dead zones, where it's like you're too small to effectively lead a competitive round, but you're too big to really be a collaborative check. So you're left in this in-between space where you're trying to co-lead a bunch of rounds. There are some people who like that strategy and it works for them. I also know a bunch of seed investors who say, if I like it, I'm doing the whole thing. There's no way I'm going to split it. So I think it's hard. There are people that do it, but for me, when I think through what makes the most sense, I love doing what I'm doing. I love this collaborative lead position. It allows me to play a role I think I'm really good at and I love. So maybe it gets a little bit bigger, but this isn't me Trojan horsing all of a sudden then doing a multi-stage thing.
And when it comes to emerging managers, you operate in a hot space, you're a spin-off, the stuff that institutionals dream of. Having said that, your fund size, it's sort of like saying no to a lot of institutional checks. It's a giant no thank you in the face of, like, you know, small foundation or like, you know, a fund of fund type of model. How was the fundraise for Step Function? How did you think about the LP persona? What were the ones that got it? What were the ones that didn't get it? Did you have to make any trade-offs between your ideal archetype and what actually ended up your LP base?
Yeah, great question. The 3 major buckets I've gone after: high net worth individuals, family offices, and fund of funds with dedicated emerging manager programs. When I say dedicated emerging managers, I mean people who are comfortable doing 50 million type of funds. Those are the 3 that I've really gravitated towards. Generally, they get it. I haven't spent as much time with institutions. What I'm doing doesn't make sense from a physics perspective for the type of check size that they want to write. So I think they get it, but you don't get to the next level of detail because there's nothing immediately actionable.
You're living in Boston, where there is a plethora of talent, pretty accessible for you to meet lots of folks in person right there. You're like, Eastern Corridor. You can get to New York. You can get to any major urban area on the East Coast very easily. However, and I'm sure I'm not the first person that asked you this question, it seems like the place that you're playing, the vertical you picked and the stage you decided to play at, like it's San Francisco, not even California, but San Francisco would be the place to be to run this playbook. Tell me, what am I missing? And how did you get other folks on board with not being boots on the ground? I know you spent time there, but like it's not quite the same.
Sure.
Right?
You and I were in San Francisco together, what was that, 3 weeks ago? And I was in New York the week after that. So there's definitely a good amount of like, you go to different places, you have networks, and those are super helpful to you. I love being part of the East Coast ecosystem. I think there's amazing founders here. I backed a couple of great teams in Boston and New York. I think the founder talent here is massively underrated. I don't view this as a mutually exclusive thing. I backed several European or American teams who have relocated to San Francisco. I'm just trying to find the best technical founders who are building infrastructure. My networks are great here, but I lived in San Francisco for a really long time. I got great networks there too. Like if these founders are just looking for great capital and wants to help them get off the ground, like I think I'm pretty flexible in terms of where it makes sense to scale these businesses. Some founders get a lot of value from being in SF. I was chatting with one founder this morning who's moving over there. That specific company is an open source component. There's a dev first component. I think there are a lot of advantages to being out there, frankly. They get of the 80-20, like if they can be out there, take the root number like 1 week out of 6 or a month out of 3 or whatever it is, then they get the vast majority of the value. And for whatever reason, their personal circumstances don't allow them to move. And that's a great way to like get in the best of both worlds.
And where do you find these introductions? Are you on Hacker News refreshing every 15 minutes? Are you on GitHub looking at the hottest repo? Like, what's the secret formula? Or is it the network that you've built over the years that ends up showing up at your door, knowing what's the value that you bring at this stage of a company formation?
That's definitely what more of the alpha is, right? Like everyone has figured out the tried and true, like, hey, what's the GitHub repo? Every firm has data science teams that are going after this. And now there's like actual companies who are just trying to qualify this data science and sell that product to VCs. So I think if you're really looking for alpha there, that's hard. And also those founders just inundated with inbound, so going through the noise is extremely challenging. So for me, yeah, 100% it's the network. I'd say there are kind of two major vectors that I really lean on. One would be the set of founders and builders I built very close relationships with. I'm currently working with founders that worked with previously, early builders of those companies who are thinking, I've got a friend, they want to start something. I'm going to send them to Will because I know that he's going to get it and this founder is going to get treated right. I'm just generally very approachable in terms of, I'm happy to brainstorm if you comes to me that. And then the other is investors I had a good relationship with who are proactively looking to bring me into things. So there's definitely a few opportunities where I've been the proverbial first call with someone who's like, hey, like I found something, but I would love partners on this. I know that you write a collaborative check. Like, would you like to take a look at this with me?
What aspects beyond the sheer technical ability and insight and where the market is moving, but what are other aspects that you underwrite founders on? Like, is there an archetype that you're looking at specifically? Because you're coming in pretty early, right? So like, it's like probably like second check, like, second kind of round of capital just after friends and family, essentially. There isn't much to judge from a commercial viability standpoint. Even if there is some traction, like, it's probably not going to be explosive. So is there something in the psychology of the founder and the way they carry themselves that you try to evaluate? What is the prototypical step function founder look like?
It's usually someone, maybe first time, may not be, but someone who's deeply technical and we get to know each other when they're at the founder curious stage. Often there isn't even friends and family capital and it's their last job. They've got a counter idea and they want someone to be a sparring partner and a full partner to them. And they're super early, still ideating. The pitch, to the extent there's any pitch at all, is super raw and very focused on how instead of the what. And the role that I think of myself I think I act like a Rosetta Stone of sorts between the tech and the business, and I help the founders think through kind of how do you talk about this killer technical breakthrough that you found, and then apply that to a business context.
You mentioned the sparring partner, the hands-on, tangible value, like figure. How do you I think it's pretty clear why a founder would send you a fellow potential founder your way to be like, you know what, I talked to it with Will. He'll help you kind of like figure things out. Once you do convince them and hopefully cut a check, how does that evolve in terms of support to that specific portfolio? What's the value add that you bring? And how does it differ relative to a big multi-stage platform? Because we know multi-stage platforms haven't been shy about getting as early as they can, especially when there is a reason to do so.
I often tell founders, look, you will get the support and experience of an institutional lead investor, but with the look, feel, and accessibility of a super angel. That's how I think about myself and how founders talk about me. In the interest of showing rather than telling, as I told you, just made a new investment, hyper-competitive, oversubscribed round. So I asked one of my founders to go to bat for me and chat with this other founder about like, hey, like, why did you pick to luck with Will? What's that experience been like? The founder in question that I'm working with, they wanted to do a hyper-aggressive customer discovery exercise right after fundraising. So the idea was, hey, we just raised our first round of financing. We want to go connect with 90 prospective customers in 90 days post-investment. I was like, all right, like I really like this. 90 and 90 is how the founder built up. And ultimately, said founder said, look, a third of the intros that we ended up taking during that were either directly from you or from the intros we got from you. So step function delivering a third of the people that the founder ultimately connected with, despite being an order of magnitude smallest investor on the cap table. Obviously, like hiring is top of mind for all these founders. So I helped this founder source when he's looking for a founding AI engineer. I was like, hey, I've got this person in my network that I've been mentoring. I think you two would really hit it off, both on a professional level, but also on a personal level. The other side is fundraising, intros, and prep. One of the customers that I introduced this founder to then introduced him to a venture fund that ultimately led a preemptive seed in this company. So it was in the trenches with this founder talking through strategy, narrative, all the fun sausage-making components that go into a preemptive round. I often find myself acting as a consigliere source to these founders. Like no matter what it is, I'm dynamically able to adapt and help them for what they need. The thing which this founder like really spoke to though, where he's like, look, like step function is pound for pound the most helpful investor in my cap table, but it's very clear the human relationship is something that founder really valued. But they put it well, like, look, being a founder is a dynamic, nuanced journey. And having someone who is hyper experienced and super focused, but is also a very caring foil and extremely connected, is someone that they really wanted to work with and could fully be themselves with. So I don't know. I hope it's not quite as polished as, hey, I have this hyper specific network of operators in this sector who will do this function for you. I think it's more true to the craft of venture I want to practice, which is, look, founders are people massively idiosyncratic, like everyone brings different strengths to the table. And so I think a huge part of the craft of this job is figuring what are the specific things that founder can excel at, whether they need help, and how do you go help them to do that?
What are some of the things that you explicitly do not promise or are very clear that you're not going to help them with?
I used to joke, if you need me to get into the IDE with you, then something's probably gone wrong. But in the age of vibe coding, I don't know if that's the case anymore. I'm willing to do just about everything. I know there's some degree of like, hey, you got to tap out at some point. But the reality is just how I'm wired. Like if a founder asks me to do something, I would do it for them. But I think that the best founders know very quickly. It's like, hey, like there's limits to what someone can do without actually being part of their company. So there's a natural kind of point where things figure themselves out.
Let's talk about the big elephant in the room. Transitioning from the Navy. It's the most Navy of navies, like a spin-off.
I'm curious to hear what this now from the Navy, from the battleship we're going to do.
I was going full raft, like, questionable flotation, unproven, yada, yada, yada. Obviously, there are some of the obvious things people talk about when transitioning from the big brand name, multi-stage, large fund, like the support you get, the IR, the accounting, the ops, the seniority, the brand, etc. What are some of the things that you miss about that time now that you're doing your own things? And what are some of the things that are like the most liberating of no longer being, in such a large partnership?
Totally. Doing something like this is really hard and it's not for everyone. I personally have found it incredibly rewarding and get to work with amazing founders and LPs who want to work with you every single day. And getting something like this off the ground gives you an insane amount of empathy. So I loved every minute of it. In terms of the things I look back on, I'm like, oh, like I missed that, or that was a nice thing to have. Incredible teammates. You're just surrounded by brilliant people. There's just one just insane kind of intellectual curiosity and horsepower. You walk in the room and your colleagues make you smarter, which I absolutely loved. There's also a network component where when you're part of a team, you can capture good networks, which I think is extremely interesting. Obviously, the brand is a big part of it. Like if you're at a big institution which has great brand recognition and a track record and those good things, and they can say here are the multi-billion-dollar IPOs that we would kind of first check in, then that's obviously helpful. And the infrastructure component, for sure, like on the LP side and having a dedicated IR function and being on fund whatever it is, but not one for free, 6 or 7, like all those things are definitely nice. In terms of the flip side of it, though, look, like I said earlier, I think ventures going 2 different ways, bifurcating, big or small and specialized. I love being higher conviction. I love being extremely nimble. I love being extremely specialized. In a world where your fund size is your strategy, I think being a very small fund gives you the best opportunity of delivering the best money returns to your LPs. And that kind of is what Venture is at the end of the day.
How do you keep your ducks in a row without that platform around you? Some folks, I would say most of the folks that we talk to come from an operator background. They were a founder, they were a very early employee, very used to wearing every possible hat, working every hour of the day, no task beneath them, et cetera, et cetera. Like some of the folks that we talk to that are spin-offs, they struggle with this. They really find it really hard to kind of like the context switching and everything else. What are some of the things that maybe you never struggle with it, but if you have, what are some of the things that you found are helping you? Any special AI tools, any particular stack in your software? It's just you. It's like, it's a one-man band and there is a lot of things to juggle. How do you do that?
The context switching is real. You're single threaded. So say, for example, there's a company on a short fuse and you need to figure out whether or not you want to join the round. All of a sudden it's like, okay, maybe a couple of days just disappear from your life. And of course, the constant drumbeat of fundraising, it's definitely a challenge. I wouldn't say I've got it perfect. I'm sure there are plenty of ways that could be improving. I think like everyone, I'm using a bunch of AI tools to try and make myself better and do more with less time. I don't think there's any particular hack that I figured out there. I think in terms of the compare and contrast to the last gig, I think there are plenty of amazing multi-stage fund investors who would not do well as kind of solo GPs or GPs in small funds, however you want to think about it. I do think there are some people who just have a different skill set. I would say though, there's actually, I don't know if this was just a function of the firm that I came up in or the role that I was in, but there's actually a lot more context switching than you would have thought. I think there's a lot of the same dynamics where it's like, hey, we have to bring a company to committee. There's a deadline. It needs to happen this Monday, not next Monday. So drop everything, go focus on this. And at the same time, you have 2 or 3 portfolio company CEOs, one's fundraising, one's selling the company, the other having a huge management team issue. And it's like, you do have to juggle all the things. And at the same time, you're also trying to be an ecosystem, build pipeline, try and find some killer operators before they start what's next. So there's a lot more of the juggling that I experienced anyway as part of my multi-stage platform than people would expect. It wasn't just a neatly siloed, here is your body of work and we will manage your workload for you. It was not just the lean teams, we're hungry, we like to operate, but just make it work.
You've been pretty active in the Boston tech ecosystem, hosting events, engaging with local talent all the time. How do you see the Boston scene evolving, particularly when it comes to infra? Is this going to be the next hotspot? Certain kind of university towns have developed themselves into hotbeds for AI specific kind of software development talent. Do you think that Boston will do that for the infra side?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of amazing technical talent here. You touched on the universities, which I think is a huge advantage. You truly have some of the best and brightest minds in the world that come through the city and call it home for some period of time, whether or not they ultimately choose to stay and build here or move on. If I think through the major buckets I spend time in, I think data infrastructure, Boston has historically had a super high pedigree in that field, and there's a lot of amazing data infrastructure practitioners who are still in this ecosystem. A lot of multi-billion-dollar data infrastructure companies have been built and are being built here right now. Cybersecurity, there's an exceptional presence here, multiple public companies, lots of interesting startups getting off the ground. I invested in one or two highly promising Boston security companies, which I'm excited to see more. Similarly, AI infrastructure, I think, again, that university component, and then there's other teams building here who have been part of sophisticated AI labs in Boston or Cambridge, starting things now. So I think that's a great ecosystem for that. The city maybe is more steak than sizzle. I think there's a lot of substance here, but a lot of people that live here would be the first to admit that the city's not good at self-promotion. I think there's some other areas where dev tools where there is a social consumer-ish element where you will find more talent who's better at being the loudest voice in the room. But I'm very bullish on the ecosystem here and the quality of founders.
What is a nugget of wisdom that we haven't touched upon, that you prepped yourself to make sure that our audience wouldn't miss from you?
Step function is the first choice for any founder building infrastructure software or security companies. And we will get there. It will be off the back of the founders who are doing the hard work to create these generational infrastructure software companies, which they're in the process of building right now. In terms of what that means from a firm evolution perspective, personal evolution perspective, it's easy to talk about the things that don't change. I always want this to be focused on the founders building infrastructure software companies. Like, that's the calling card of the brand. I will continue to want to be as personally accessible and as open and as available with each of the founders as I'm able to be right now. In a world of industrial scale venture, I personally am drawn to the boutique, artisanal, handcrafted, however you want to think about it. The part of venture that speaks to the romantic in me is, hey, find these crazy, brilliant people who need someone on their side. They do something which is just massively against the odds. What's the only commonality in the founders you work with? They've had the courage to do this thing which statistically shouldn't work, and it's probably not the economically rational thing for them to do. But they have so much belief in what they're doing, it's bothering them so much, and they're so irrational about it, that they're like, I gotta go do this. I just want to continue to earn the right to partner with the best people building in that domain for as long as I can.
Is it just going to be you?
For now, I'm absolutely loving it. Like, I think there's something super empowering about being able to look a founder in the eye and say, this is the investment committee. If I have conviction, I will drop everything and you'll be able to hold me accountable to every promise I made to you. There are people I consider the extended step function family who I want to go to bat for these teams as well. But ultimately, it's like, hey, like, you want a first show? Grab mine. I think there's something extremely powerful in that message, and it probably doesn't scale. But again, I think that's the beauty of it.
Is there a war where this doesn't scale and doesn't have to scale? Like, is there a war where it's just a series of small vehicles stuck on top of each other, very tidy, very focused, very early stage?
100%. Yeah, I mean, I had a whole email exchange recently with a very good friend and mentor of mine where his feedback was, hey, there's only so much LP capital out there for $35 million funds, which is going to consistently be stable. And I think maybe you're seeing some evolution there, but let's say right now it's not. I don't know. Like, for me, it's like, I think that's a great kind of thing to be doing where I'm like, look, like, I'm very good at this. I'm very clear about what my role is. If it's not broken, I think I am exceptionally performing that role. I just want to continue doing it and driving the best returns I can. Like, if it goes well, there'll be a temptation to step up. Like, if you have a thing that you're great at doing, just continue to be world class at it. Don't try and doing something else. But no, I mean, look, we haven't really riffed yet on like the future of VC. Definitely an angle we could go down. I feel like one of the big things, which is like, I don't know if it's just clickbaity, but people love to say, oh, there's too many emerging managers. The couple of the emerging managers is right around the corner. I'm like, yeah, sure, there's probably a lot of people who got into this for the wrong reasons. At the same time, I'm pretty sure I read an information headline yesterday about like 6 super credible people leaving that brand name firms to start solo GP initiatives. As much as I hear about the impending call, I also hear about like way more people, credible people leaving great platforms who are raising big funds. I don't really know what to make of that. I think it's amazing. You get these super hungry people who develop these hyper-specialized vehicles who have an extreme incentive to make sure it works because it's their name suddenly on the line. But I don't know. Like one LP recently gave me an analogy, something along the lines of too much manager demand relative to LP supply. I think there's some degree of that and some structural issues in place, but then there's also venture funds getting bigger than ever and crazy amounts of money going to about 30 funds and what the venture returns can look like. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of dots left to settle on that.
Yeah. I mean, you know where we stand.
Yeah.
In the same camp.
Yeah.
I also think that we talked this morning how another recording, it's almost like somebody took a hammer and smashed the unicorn factory. It's now in 1,000 pieces and getting rebuilt. It's not going to look like what it was before. Some things are going to be better, some things are going to be worse. One of the things that is definitely going to be better, driven by the influx of capital coming into the asset class, is the unbundling of the accelerator model. And so the fact that you had these gatekeepers of sorts to the venture ecosystem, where if you were a founder, there was no will. Like, there was a Techstart, there was a 500 startup, there was like a Y Combinator where you would have to go through that program, you would have to pay that wig in terms of dilution to then be put in front of the couple dozen VC firms that would do seed stage investing at the time. That model is completely going away. It's completely decentralized. And that's good. That's good for the founder. That's good for the innovation cycle, where like you get to choose, you get to pick your own crew of advisors, of sponsors, of partners, of supporters at the early stages. That's invaluable because every company is different, every founder is different, every market is different, and there isn't a single platform that can do it at scale and do it really well. And I think that everybody that has tried has failed. Like, Techstars and 500 startups, I wouldn't call them successful at this point in time in the life cycle of where they are as business. And Y Combinator narrowed down very much on a very specific type of company, a very specific type of founder. And so it isn't serving for everything else. I don't think we're going back there. I think things are changing for good. When people say there is a lot more supply than there is demand, I don't know about that. There is a fundamental constraint on the supply of talent, which is then turning into a fundamental constraint in the supply of opportunities. And so prices will kind of go bigger, and it will attract more capital in the sense that people will want to create new platforms and new opportunities to generate more deal flow for the later stage funds. And so there will be a lot more step functions. That's our vision of where things are headed. We may be completely wrong about it, but there is a massive bifurcation. And the danger zone is the middle, if anything. And that dollars that are going to be allocated to the middle will be split either very early or very late. And that's a lot of money right now that has to cycle through. It's going to take probably 5 years at least to get to that point, but it's going to happen. As a founder, as a manager, as an LP myself, when I look at the industry as a whole, it's sort of obvious. I grew up in this industry. I don't know anything else. It's very different from somebody who has a paper company that is diversifying companies' assets and doesn't know what they're looking at. It's going to take them a couple of cycles going through Stepstone before figuring out that allocating to 100 million Series A fund may not be the best use of their money. It's very different. I can be a lot more opinionated than you can on this.
Yeah, I mean, look, directionally, I completely agree. I hope there's hundreds more step functions out there. I think it's an amazing thing for founders. The counterintuitive thing that maybe people miss is it's easy to think of those being competitors. They're really not. Someone said to me, VC funds don't compete the same way companies do, but I think that's really right. Like, I think there's so many people who I work with on a regular basis who ostensibly have a similar focus and should be like, oh, the competition, they're going after the same thing. Not really. Like, we trade notes all the time about opportunities. We're drawn to different things in founders. In a world where it's a dating game, we're attracted to different things. And it's actually way more likely that we're both going to end up collaborating, being on the same cap table, or rowing in the same direction, than it is like, hey, we're going to be knife fighting over the last couple points per round.
Yeah. Hard agree. Well, thank you for joining us this Friday afternoon. Really appreciate your time and your story. Looking forward to see where this evolves. I obviously have a bias and I hope that you stay small and never end up competing against the Navy you left and you stay a little pirate sailing the seven seas.
I like that.
But we'll see where it goes. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, Sunwoo, read us out.
You've just listened to the last episode of Season 2 of Slice. the podcast for emerging managers. Special thank you to Will for joining us for the conversation and to Evan for introducing us to Will. Next week, Fabri and I discuss takeaways, highlights, lessons from season 2 and all of the guests, so make sure to tune in for that. We'll see you then. Bye.